Everyone has a story. I get them to tell it. Welcome to the Aron Bender Podcast, conversations with media personalities about their personal and professional lives and journeys. Really appreciate your support, whether you're watching on YouTube or nightly at 11 p.m. Pacific or 2 a.m. Eastern on DB&A TV at dbnatelevision.tv or streaming with the DB&A TV app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV, or listening on your favorite platform. Before we get to my conversation with Natalie Brunell, a little about my story. I'm a widowed dad of two girls who just lost their mom, a grieving husband, a man in recovery trying to reconnect with the world with fresh eyes, faith, and perspective, a college journalism professor, a white guy in a world of injustice, a 20-year broadcast media veteran who had his dream job and then lost it. A year and a half ago, God gave me a gift, an opportunity to stop, step back, and breathe so I could learn about love, vulnerability, forgiveness, grace, self-care, patience, and understanding. Natalie Brunell is a reporter at Spectrum News 1 SoCal. She's worked in Palm Springs and Sacramento, has worked for ABC News as well. A couple of years ago, she entered the podcast space with Career Stories and recently made a big splash in the business podcast arena with Coin Stories. Let's reference right off the bat the fact that you're actually calling in from Bitcoin Beach, and this was not planned at all. Check out the shirt I chose to wear today. Palm trees.
You're matching my palm tree energy.
We've got PTE. It's all about the PTE. So you actually just got back from Miami. I don't know if it was the first ever Bitcoin conference or the first one in Miami or the idea that it's actually now one as the pandemic is lifting, but how was that? And we're going to get into why all of a sudden you're going to a Bitcoin conference in Miami in a bit as we talk about Coin Stories, which I referenced in the intro. But how was Miami and this Bitcoin conference?
Oh, the Bitcoin conference was fantastic. They've actually been going on for years. I think they've been going on for about a decade, and they've been growing every single year. And this one was the biggest yet. I believe there were more than 12,000 attendees. It was held in Miami, which is kind of becoming a Bitcoin hub or Mecca. It's very welcoming to that side of the technology industry, and the mayor is pro Bitcoin. I believe that he plans to put some on the balance sheet, and some people are planning to get paid in Bitcoin potentially. So the conference was just great. I mean, the headline speakers, the panelists were phenomenal and so interesting. They come from a range of different backgrounds, many of them having been, former investment bankers or hedge fund managers, or have some really fascinating technology background, like the Winklevoss brothers who helped start Facebook. And it was just nice to be in a place with just like-minded people who are really excited about this technology and want to understand it better, want to understand some of the FUD that we've been seeing, fear, uncertainty, doubt lately that's taken.
Hold on. I love how you threw that out there and then defined it, because I had no idea what you were talking about. The FUD?
Yeah, FUDsters, the fear, uncertainty, doubt crowd that's been bringing the price down. So, we were discussing all that and sort of the market volatility. And then there were just so many great speakers that have all these philosophical views of how society can really be better because of Bitcoin. Like, my favorite panel was called The Case for Morality and Bitcoin. And it was all about how Bitcoin sort of brings out the best in humanity and the best in sort of our ability to work together and work.
That is lofty. That is lofty. Bringing out the best in humanity.
Yes, that's what we talked about. We stayed kumbaya in Miami.
Now, I just got into the cryptocurrency about a month ago, and I think I messaged you about the time that I did that. I purchased 2 Ethereum.
Wow.
All 2 of them, because my brother-in-law on a Sunday morning came running downstairs, who's like, dude, open up Robinhood, open up. And I'm like, I don't have Robinhood. What am I supposed to do? And so he walked me through that process, and I bought a couple of Ethereum, and within 24 hours, the price had gone up enough that I sold I sold those 2 Ethereum to get back. What did I own? No, I bought 2.5 Ethereum. I'm sorry, 2.5 Ethereum. And then next thing you know, I'm selling 2 Ethereum for the price that I paid for 2.5.
Oh, wow.
And so now I just open up the Robinhood app every now and then. I'll do that right now. And yeah, I'm up like $1,300 for the half that I have left. And
Wow.
I just let it sit there, just let it ride. You know, I got in, I got out, what I put in, and
Yeah.
now it's just kind of it's house
Yeah.
money. Just
Got it.
at that point it's house money. How did you get into it? Did your brother-in-law come running downstairs and tell you? Yeah, how did you get into it? And then we'll talk about coin stories, because you're not just getting into it for yourself, but you're also trying to teach other people and shine the spotlight on people in the cryptocurrency market. But how did you get into it to begin with?
Sure. So it was back in 2017 when I first bought Bitcoin. I was working up in Sacramento at a local news station, and I had a boyfriend whose friends were very involved in Silicon Valley and in the tech world. One of them actually worked for Coinbase, and so I remember hanging out with them, and someone brought up Bitcoin, and I said, "What's Bitcoin?" And they said it's
Right.
digital currency, it's digital money. And I believe, what a lot of Bitcoiners say, it's the future, was maybe thrown out. And I just became kind of curious about it. I was curious what it was. And, I mean, I think all of us can think about Silicon Valley and some of the amazing tech companies that were started in San Francisco in the last decade. And, they might have started very small, and some of them have ended up changing our lives, whether it's Facebook or Uber. So I definitely felt like people in that space who went to college and did tech and programming and developing, they maybe sometimes know what they're talking about, and they're ahead of the curve on some things. So I just thought, wow, okay, what is Bitcoin? I'm going to look into it. I didn't go down the rabbit hole though, the infamous rabbit hole of Bitcoin. I just kind of learned a little bit and enough to spark my interest. And I saw that it had appreciated so much. It used to be worth $1. And it was like a couple thousand by the point I learned about it. So I thought, you know what? If this does have legs, this might be something. So I purchased a little bit of Bitcoin back then, and I ended up even pitching a story about it for my local affiliate. So I did a story about like a local ATM at a Sacramento suburb mall that, sold Bitcoin, and you could buy Bitcoin there. And I remember my newsroom thought I was probably crazy. They're like, this is not a thing. We can't be sending viewers down this path. And I'm like, but it exists and people do believe in it. So let's explore it. And it wasn't until, to be honest with you, the market really crashed, that I decided to really study Bitcoin, like really get into it and see why some people believe that this could be the solution to sort of the money trouble that we're in as a country. And I read a book called The Bitcoin Standard. I ended up reading it 3 times. I actually have it right here, because people that are interested in Bitcoin, this is like the Bible. This is like the best book that's ever been written. Every Bitcoiner knows it. It's by an economist by the name of Saifedean Ammous, who I had the pleasure of meeting in Miami.
Oh, wow,
And
nice.
um, and the reason I was interested is because I wanted to understand money, and I wanted to understand markets, and I wanted to understand money printing, because we saw an unprecedented amount of money printing as a response to the pandemic. We were essentially in a wartime, when it came to a government response. But I didn't understand what all of that truly meant, and so I really began to study economics. I don't have an economics background, but I was fascinated by it.
I was
And
gonna say, because we've talked before. We talked for my podcast a couple of years ago. There was no mention of any kind of business or economics or anything like that.
I
So,
know.
and we're I think a lot of time people in business get into journalism to write about business.
Mhm.
Not a lot of journalists go the other way, where it's like, oh, I'm all in on business right now, because a
Yeah.
lot of journalists, we just don't think that way. You know, it's just not how our brains work.
No, you're right. And now I look back and I so wish that I had taken more economics classes or learned a little bit more about finance and how the stock market works and how to invest, because now that I'm actually making money, I'm way more interested, right? And like turning that money into more money and saving my money and making sure that the money doesn't disappear that I do have. But yeah, I really went down that rabbit hole, and I became really empowered by what I learned about Bitcoin. And coming from an immigrant family where savings has always been really important, the idea of like hard work and saving for the future, and the desire to not have your money in the bank just erode in value is really important to me and really resonates with me and what my family has gone through. So Bitcoin I just became more and more interested in it. And that's what caused me to want to start a podcast about it. I wanted to understand the space better, and what better way to understand it than the people who kind of make up the space and are the leading voices in it. So I started to interview them.
So when you go to your newsroom in 2017, your assignment editors, your bosses, and say, I want to do this thing on Bitcoin, and they're like, okay, explain it to me in 30 seconds. You still have to do that in 2021 for many, many people, probably myself included.
Yeah.
So what's your 30-second explanation of what Bitcoin is? And how did this immigrant family that you are, born of, how did they take it? Because you're trying to explain it to them too. Like, hey, I've got this new podcast called Coin Stories. It's about Bitcoin. And they're like, what? So what's
Well,
your 30-second explanation?
well, it's funny you say that, first of all, because my mom, ever since we immigrated here, has really primarily worked in the banking sector. So, and the other funny thing is, in 2017, my newsroom looked at me with like, a side eye when I talked
Yep.
about Bitcoin, and that's still the case today.
Yeah,
There's
I was. Did you expect in 2017 to then fast forward 4 years? You, I don't think you could have imagined, because you didn't even start Career Stories, the podcast,
yeah.
for a couple of years. But I don't think you could have imagined 4 years later you'd still be explaining it like this.
No, and I had no idea what the price would be, and I had no. Well, obviously, we couldn't predict a pandemic that would cause the economic shift that we're seeing right now. But yeah, it's really funny to think about what has and hasn't changed since 2017. But just as far as explaining Bitcoin in simplest terms, it is digital cash. It was created as a peer-to-peer cash network that has absolutely no third party. It's not controlled by any government or authority. It's completely decentralized, and it's backed up by a network of thousands of computers around the world that are maintaining essentially this public ledger. And that public ledger is the blockchain of transactions that are happening all across the world. And it's basically a way to have money that's not controlled by any authority. It's controlled by you. You have the control over your money. And it's seen by many Bitcoin believers as a store of value that will appreciate in value even more than something like gold, which has historically been seen as a very strong store of value. So you can transact in it, but a lot of people just want to hold it because they believe that it's going to be worth a lot in the future.
All right. I don't know if that was 30 seconds. I didn't look at the clock. I should have looked at the clock to see if that fit into 30 seconds. But when I go back and I try to put this on Instagram Reels,
I mean,
I'm going to time you. I'll see if I can even put a timer on it. Probably not, because I'm not that fancy. But uh, it's one thing, though, to get into it. It's another to then decide, okay, I want to start a podcast about it, because it's the podcast I do. It's easy, honestly, because I just have conversations with people about their lives, about their journeys. I hear what they've said, and then I kind of go from there. I respond, and I don't necessarily need expertise
sure.
on whatever they are doing. You, on the other hand, I would imagine you need a lot more than just, hey, so what'd you get into Bitcoin, man? You know, and then I'll just listen to your answers, and then you need some expertise. You need some. Do you feel like you had to kind of bone up to be able to do this podcast, or do you feel like you were at a point where you're like, you know what, I am ready to take this to the next level and go podcast with it?
I definitely had to really study it. And had I not studied it, I probably wouldn't have wanted to start a podcast about it. Like I said, that book, Bitcoin Standard, I read it 3 times. And I read it 3 times because I did really like it. And there were so many things that resonated. But I also read it 3 times because it's really complicated and it's hard to understand some of these economic principles if you don't have a finance background. So for me, it was really trying to cement all of that in my head so that I can get to a place where I can speak about it and converse about it in a way that's not too dense. And I just really wanted to better understand the people in this space who I really looked up to and admired. I mean, the people who are the loudest leading voices, a lot of them have really strong finance or tech backgrounds. A lot of them ran successful investment firms and still do, or former hedge fund managers. Some of them predicted the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009. So I wanted to better, get to know them and why they believe in this and understand their philosophy behind it and how it could kind of change our economic system and return sort of financial sovereignty to people. Because for me, the thing that gets me angry and makes me, really passionate is this income inequality that we see constantly. This idea that the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, the system feels kind of rigged. And if you don't know the right people, or if you don't have the right kind of job, it's just so hard to make it. And it's harder every single year. And I don't think that it should be that way, especially in a country like America that stands for these values of hard work and being able to climb the social ladder if you work hard and you're a good person, So yeah, I was really interested in the space. I really studied it. I studied all the people. The people I've been interviewing are, in the finance world, but now because of Bitcoin, they're also writing books on Bitcoin, or they're blogging about it, or they have podcasts or shows. So I just devoured all of that information as much as I could in my free time. I would spend literally my weekends, and 6 o'clock in the morning, I'd be reading articles about economics and all that. So it's been a really fun last couple of months, and now being a part of that space and being kind of one of the first women that doesn't have a finance background that's venturing in is really fun as well, because I think the message needs to be simplified and it needs to get out to more people so that they can make the decision for themselves. But people should really understand that this exists and understand the philosophy behind it. And it'd be cool to have more chicks in it, because the Bitcoin conference was definitely male dominated.
How was that for you navigating that?
It was different. I did expect it to be more men than women, but I sort of expected that, because I'm a girl, I'm curious, I tend to be bubbly and happy, and like, I want to learn about it. And I'm pretty friendly because of my journalism background. I thought that it would be pretty easy to just like meet new people, make new friends. And it was so funny that it still felt a little bit closed off. And the guys that are very popular in this space, they're treated like celebrities. Like, I would be hanging out with some of the people I interviewed on the podcast, and men would be coming up very shy and awkward, like, hey, can I take a photo with you, Pomp? Like Anthony Pompliano is one of like the biggest people in the space. They'd be like, can we do a selfie, please? And he'd be like, yeah, sure, come on. But it was like he was George Clooney. It was like he was this famous, and they couldn't care less who I was.
They're handing you the phone to take the picture.
Exactly. A girl in the space, who cares? But Pomp's here. I got to take a picture with Pomp. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, it definitely, I wish there were more women in this space, because then it would be a little bit more fun for sure.
You talked about your immigrant family, what they had to go through. What are some things that come to mind when you think about what they had to go through and how it shaped your view of the world and your path?
Yeah, so I mean, I could obviously talk for a while about this, but to summarize, my family is from Poland. My parents grew up in a communist country. I remember hearing stories, especially when I was younger, of, a time when they would have to line up for things like bread, and things, just the cost of things. And it was so hard to imagine a better life. And there was really no concept of, this social mobility the way that it exists or has existed in the United States. And so my family always wanted to come here. It was like my mom's dream to have her family here and to achieve the American dream. And it was never like to become a Jeff Bezos, or to become like to have a yacht. It was literally to have a nice house, to have your kids go to a good school, to have enough money for a nice vacation, and just, to work hard and be able to retire. It was pretty simple. It was like middle class was the dream. And so we came here. My family waited about 20 years to come here legally. And they started from scratch. My mom was in her late 30s. My dad was in his early 40s. I know we've talked about a little bit of this on our last podcast, but it was hard. It's hard to start over in a new country. And they worked their way up and were finally able, I remember when I was little and we were finally able to buy a townhouse. We could afford a loan for a townhouse. And all my other friends lived in an actual house. I was just excited about a townhouse. I always had neighbors, either above me, below me, side, like I've always had neighbors. And then they lost everything in the financial crisis. They had just made it only to just lose it essentially. And I didn't really understand at the time because I was in college, but the system, like some people knew what was going to happen, and the average person just got screwed. And my family was the average family that worked hard, that had a loan, and all of a sudden it was like the rug was pulled out from under them. And so that just made me really aware that things can change at any moment. Like your situation is very precarious, even when things seem to be going well. And that's scary. It's always like money has always been a stress for me. Like I feel like, I need to make more. I never have enough. It's so scary to save. School's so expensive. Houses are more and more expensive. And it's so sad, right? That I went to school, I did all the right things, and yet the idea of buying a house, especially in a city like LA, is so impossible to me. Like, how do you afford that? And so that's really what informed sort of, I think, the mental, the place I was at mentally in order to want to learn more about economics, especially when the market tanked in the pandemic. And I knew that we were on the precipice of a change. Like we weren't going to go back to a pre-COVID world. And I wanted to understand it better so that I could make some decisions about my financial future. So, and Bitcoin really, it brings you hope. It really does.
Well, again, it brings out the best in humanity, right?
It does. It does.
Well, and you mentioned that your curiosity has really just kind of driven a lot of it. Have you always been curious, like from, childhood on, or was there something that happened or an event, maybe the financial crisis that, drained your family of everything it had worked for? Was there one thing or a series of things that sparked the curiosity?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And now, of all times, I do have an answer for it. I was always curious, which is why I think journalism was a great career path for me. But I think I was curious about things like politics and, just how certain laws were passed. And I think I was curious about the wrong thing. And what I should have been curious about is really our monetary system and economics and how decisions are made and how our money supply is created and expanded, because I was looking at the problems and examining them and wanting to explore them. And I didn't have that extra context of, oh, by the way, our monetary supply is being inflated constantly. Our money's being devalued. The money that I put in the bank with that tiny interest rate, Chase, it's being eroded in how much I can actually, what purchasing power it actually has. And so I feel almost like this veil has been lifted. And I feel like I really, again, I wish I had learned about about macroeconomics and just finance in general when I was younger, because now I get it. And now some of the things that I've looked at, whether it's, reporting on homelessness or reporting on healthcare, it's like now I see it through a very different lens of how certain decisions have been made under our monetary system. And now all of a sudden I question some more things that I used to never question. So I would say that I've always been curious and I've always asked questions. I was always interested in politics and news in general, and corruption was always a passion of mine to expose, but I never looked at it with that extra lens. And now I think I think I'm better for it, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how has it changed you as a journalist? I mean, you've been in the news business several years now, cub reporter in Sacramento or otherwise, to now, how has that changed and shaped you?
Well, I think it's really made me think about what throwing money at a problem does. It really doesn't fix the problem. That's what is really, I think, kind of showcased, at least for, reporting in California. You could probably imagine one of the big things is obviously reporting on things like homelessness.
Yep.
You see these issues where it's like we're literally throwing money at the problem. We're spending more and more billions every single year. that almost seem like they're coming from thin air, yet the problem continues to get worse and worse. It's not getting better. So there's an issue there, right? So how can we fix it without necessarily just inflating our money supply like this? And that's what really scares me. It's like I used to never think about inflation, but yet at the same time, even before the pandemic, every single year, our money is not worth as much as it was the year before. And if you look at the like CPI calculator, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has this calculator that I sometimes have calculated before, like what's the equivalent of $100 today versus 1980 versus 1980.
Right.
I mean, it's shockingly scary. And the price of college when I was at Pepperdine, how much it costs versus, today. It's just scary how everything is getting more expensive, but the average person is not making more money. The rich people, the billionaires are making a lot more money, but we're not. And so I think it's really, that's how it's, I think, changed me as a journalist, is it's causing me to look at the money more. Like, where's it coming from? Where is it going? And is it really changing the situation it's supposed to fix?
Now, you've had Career Stories, that podcast, for a few years now. You now have Coin Stories. I thought you were putting Career Stories kind of on the back burner, and then all of a sudden this week, boom, hello, new episode. So
Yeah.
how are you juggling that? And let's also congratulate you, because I think you got to, was it 22 was like your highest ranking on the Apple charts and other things. Like you were just killing it with the Coin Stories, just that meteoric rise, like within a week, all of a sudden you're near the tops of the charts. So congratulations.
Thank you. Well, the Bitcoin community is so supportive. Like, I put it out there and I'm a newbie, and they were like, whoa, let's retweet this girl. So no, I really appreciate that people downloaded. In fact, I was actually surprised how much it really resonated with people. I assumed that it was actually going to be muddy waters because I'm new to the space. I don't have a finance background, but yeah, I released some of the episodes with these really big guests, and people really ran to it and really enjoyed it. And I think the new thing that I offer that people hadn't seen before is really the origin stories, which comes from Career Stories. Like, I just love hearing who people are, where they started, how they came to be where they are, how they succeeded, what obstacles did they run into. I'm just so inspired by origin stories of success. So that's kind of, it's a mix of career stories and that sort of idea of who a person is and where they come from, and then plus their philosophy on Bitcoin, why they believe in it. And so, yeah, it shot up in the charts very, very quickly. And I had more downloads in 2 weeks on Coin Stories almost than I had in 3 years of Career Stories, which is like, and I've been in Career Stories for 3 years.
Well, and without Career Stories, there is no Coin Stories. That was kind of your internship, if you will, to now, okay, Coin Stories, here we go. How are you juggling it with reporting at Spectrum News 1 SoCal?
Yeah, so it's just about it's just time management, making time on the side. So I definitely am now a very early riser. I get up between 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'll do a lot of work either before my shift or after my shift or on weekends. Like, it's something that I do need to, I need to take more time off because it lowers your immune system when you work too much. But yeah, I need to figure out a way to say no to something, because I also teach at USC. And so I'm finding myself often working like 60 hours a week, if not more. And I work on weekends. And so I need to be better about that. But I'm really passionate about this. Like, I love my reporting job because I get to do really great stories for a channel that believes in human interest and community-driven storytelling and finding really interesting characters. And in fact, I've done several Bitcoin stories for them and examined it from the angles for, against. But I'm also super passionate about the format of a podcast that's so much, it's free flowing. There's no time limit. I get to learn about all these really interesting people. And then I also love teaching. So it's like, I don't know, I need more days in the week for sure.
Well, more days of the week, but also just the idea that taking 15 minutes for yourself, 30 minutes for yourself to just do nothing, no phone, no computer, sit
Yeah.
outside and just get some sun and just reminding yourself that a broken you is no good to anybody.
Yes, I meditate that I'm on Bitcoin Beach and I think about the, cool ocean breeze, and I think about my Bitcoin, each one becoming worth $1 million. I center myself again.
Yeah, if only we could just meditate it. Just meditate that price right up, please. Yes.
But you know what? I gotta tell you, like, coming back from Miami, I don't know if you heard about the Twitter space with the president of El Salvador.
Uh, yes.
It's
Yes.
like the most fun I've ever had on social media. It started randomly. There was no notice or anything, but I'm very on, much on Twitter and following the people in the space. And El Salvador was about to be voting to make Bitcoin legal tender in the country. And one of the leading voices in Bitcoin, who I hope will be on my podcast, his name is Nick Carter. He was also at the conference and I got a chance to meet him. He was just bored cooking dinner at night. And he goes, I want to start a Twitter space, which is kind of like Clubhouse, like a live podcast. I want to start it about this El Salvador decision. And he brought in some of the big Bitcoiners and they got the president of the country to join just before his Congress was like voting on legalizing Bitcoin. And they're just riffing and he's answering questions. He's allowing like other people to, send in questions about how it's going to work, how it's going to function, how they're going to mine Bitcoin. He said there's going to be volcano energy, mining Bitcoin. And we're
BVE.
yeah, we're just having this like live Twitter conversation with the president of a nation spontaneously. And he's so down to earth answering all these questions. And then they did the live vote. Like we could hear it and then we could hear all the claps and like they legalized Bitcoin while we're sitting there with the president on Twitter. And then I tweeted like something like, is this what it's like to have a millennial president? And I sent at the president and he retweeted me. Like, I just thought this is so cool. Like this,
Yeah.
If this is the future, this is really cool.
Yeah, and just the idea of the world getting that much smaller.
Yeah. I mean, and people coming together. I mean, it was truly, we talk about democracy and how social media has democratized things, but you're getting to ask questions from the president of a country and he's in real time changing his monetary policy for the country. And you hear a roar of applause because it just passed with like a super majority vote. It was like, wow, this is fascinating. This is a really interesting time to be alive.
When is the president of El Salvador going to be on Coin Stories? That's what I want to know.
Me too. This is an official request. I have sent him a Twitter DM or two. So that would be great. Actually, one of the other podcast hosts, he hosts like one of the most popular podcasts on Bitcoin. It's called What Bitcoin Did, Peter McCormick. He just sat down with the president. So nice. It can happen.
Yeah, it's not out of the question. At least you know that the president is open to it and hopefully you can go through that door.
Yeah, step 1, retweet. Step 2, coin story.
Natalie, thank you so much for this. Really, really appreciate it. You don't need my pat on the back or anything like that, but I'm super proud of you. I'm super proud to know you and be your friend and watch how you've grown these last few years and just exploded in this space. So congratulations. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I've put all of Natalie's links in the show notes on YouTube, as well as your favorite podcast platform. Thanks for watching the Aron Bender podcast here on YouTube or DB&A TV. That's DB&A TV app on Amazon, Fire on Roku, on Apple TV, or DB&A television.tv every night, 11 p.m. Pacific, 2 a.m. Eastern. Be well, and thanks for watching.